Something that doesn't get questioned very much is when Ratatouille is supposed to take place. According to the original Pixar theory, this movie takes place in 2007, which is the year the movie came out. But I'm gonna prove why that's not the case. There are two main issues I have with the original Pixar theory. That is the placement of Ratatouille and Finding Nemo. The Pixar theory claims that Finding Nemo takes place in 2003, which is when the movie was released. But the only problem with that is that in Finding Dory, we can see Riley from Inside Out at the Marine Life Institute. And we know that Inside Out is supposed to take place in modern day, which at the time was 2015. Finding Nemo takes place 1 year before Finding Dory, meaning that it takes place in 2014, not 2003. To be fair, neither Finding Dory nor Inside Out were released when the Pixar theory was written. Ratatouille has a very similar issue, however, because if it took place in 2007, then why does everything in this movie support the fact that it takes place in the mid-60s? Some of the TVs that we can see are black and white. Colored TVs started becoming mainstream in the mid-60s. The rifle that the old lady has is very old-fashioned. The cars that we see resemble the cars from the 1960s. The same Vespas used in Luca are present, and Luca is confirmed to take place in the 1950s. Chef Skinner states that the wine he gives Linguini is dated 1961. And even though it could be wine that was aged 46 years, it's more likely that it's an expensive wine that's aged only a couple of years. The biggest piece of evidence that I have that Ratatouille takes place in the 1960s is Bon Voyage. He's the villain from the beginning of The Incredibles and can be seen in Ratatouille. And he doesn't look a day older than he did in The Incredibles. If you didn't know, the beginning of The Incredibles takes place in 1947. If this were taking place in 2007, assuming he's around 30 in The Incredibles, that would make him 90 in Ratatouille. And this definitely isn't a 90-year-old. So even though he looks about the same age as in The Incredibles, he's actually about a decade and a half older here, which works. And if you didn't know, Linguini is wearing Incredibles underwear, further supporting the fact that this is taking place in the mid-60s, closer to the time of The Incredibles. However, even with all of this evidence suggesting that it takes place in the mid-60s, there are two decent arguments for it taking place in the 2000s. The first is Colette's magazine in Inside Out. This is when Riley is a baby, so if she's 11 in 2015, that means she was born in 2004. And let's say she's about 3 here, that would be 2007, when Ratatouille was released. And after Gusteau became popular again, Colette became a bigger name, so it would make sense for her to be on a magazine. However, it's very possible that she just became a well-known chef and was still being put on cooking magazines decades later. And the other, even more convincing piece of evidence is Gusteau's will, which says made in Paris, June 23rd, 2001. And this is where the theory gets interesting. Considering there's more evidence that it takes place in the 60s, it makes it really strange that Gusteau would date his will 2001. But something even more strange is why he would even have a will at all. It's stated that Gusteau was the youngest chef to receive a 5-star rating. Being that he was this young, why would he decide to write a will? It's almost as if he was anticipating his death. But when he did die, he didn't want anyone to know that he wrote his will so young. So he put a date far into the future when it would be more reasonable for him to write his will. Let's assume he was 30 when he wrote his will. If this is 1965, then by 2001 he would be in his 60s. Another detail I noticed is that the date looks tampered with, possibly meaning that he went back later on and changed it. The story of Gusteau's death that we hear in the movie is very vague and doesn't really make sense. Apparently he died of a broken heart because he got a bad review which made him lose a star. To me that doesn't seem like it's telling the whole story. If he decided to write his will at such a young age, it makes it seem like he was suspecting something to happen. While it does seem possible that he was killed similarly to Hector in Coco, I don't think that's the case because there aren't any real suspects. But for some reason or another, he decided to write his will at a young age. It's also entirely possible that he did just die from a broken heart, just not for the reason you think. I believe that he died of a broken heart not because he lost a star in his restaurant, but because of his breakup with his wife. Gusteau's wife is named Renata, and she died shortly before the events of the movie. In the letter that she writes to Skinner, it says he probably remembers her from when she and Gusteau were close, meaning that there was a breakup, which is a far more realistic explanation as to why he died. So in conclusion, the movie Ratatouille takes place in the mid-60s and Gusteau died of a broken heart due to the breakup of him and his wife. Let me know what you think in the comments, and while you're at it, why don't you go check out my video about the origin story of Woody. Thank you for watching, and bye!